A few moments ago, and as Rabbi Cosgrove mentioned, we literally just returned from a very powerful trip in Israel. It was an opportunity to express solidarity. It was an opportunity to show support. It was an opportunity to volunteer. We brought tactical gear with us. In many ways, this experience for me was more intense than being there in November, which was closer to October 7th. But what we didn't hear on that trip was the testimony from people that we were able to hear on this trip, whether it was displaced refugees from Kfar Aza, or you'll hear some of these experiences as we continue, all of us, many of whom are here tonight. I know there's some who are still in Israel, but there's a very strong showing of the group. It is my pleasure to introduce Alyssa first and Stacey Maman, who will share some words, some reflections, some observations of our time together in Israel. Alyssa, I'm going to ask you to speak first, followed by Stacey. Oh, thanks.
Shabbat Shalom. 45 Park Avenue Synagogue members and staff arrived home Thursday morning after a jam-packed few days in Israel together on Park Avenue's second Solidarity mission. As we weren't the first trip, we knew it would be similar to others, the stories, the places, and even the people. But even with the similarities, there were differences too. Both Park Avenue trips heard from Tal Becker, an international law expert. But since the last mission, Tal had defended Israel at the International Court of Justice. Both trips met with hostage families, but as bad as it was at the 60-day mark, it was now day 124. The airport was still relatively empty, but there were more people, including more men, out in Tel Aviv, as some reservists had returned home from fighting. Having heard many stories over the last 4 months, I was eager to go myself and see how I would feel. And while it was one thing to hear the stories, it was a completely different experience to bear witness firsthand. I was overcome with a range of emotions throughout the week. On the one hand, I felt distress and loss seeing the atrocities and suffering at Kibbutz Kfar Aza. I felt anxious thinking about the unknown of what might come in the war, both for those fighting on the front line, for the state of Israel, and for the Jewish people more broadly. I felt uneasy in Hostage Square, seeing a traditional Shabbat table juxtaposed with a Shabbat experience of those still kidnapped. I teared up as a 12-year-old wished for his brother, who's currently still a hostage, to be at his 13th birthday party next month. And I shuddered walking through an exhibit mimicking the conditions of the tunnels in Gaza. On the other hand, I felt hope. Each individual we encountered thanked us for coming. Their gratitude was overwhelming. I felt optimism hearing from the next generation of Jewish leaders speak about their experiences serving in the IDF and volunteering with the disabled. I was encouraged while baking babka that was delivered with our handwritten notes to soldiers for Shabbat. I felt the gratitude of an IDF commander as he accepted the duffel bags of winter uniforms for his unit that we brought over. And I felt a sense of belonging, singing familiar songs led by Cantor Davis with families of hostages, including singing Ose Shalom with the parents of Hirsch Goldberg Poland, to whom we dedicated our Shabbat candle lighting tonight. Traveling alongside the Park Avenue Synagogue community and with my mom further enhanced the Solidarity mission to Israel. Having grown up here, Park Avenue is my second home. And when I realized I needed to go to Israel to experience things firsthand, there was no doubt that I wanted this trip to be with Park Avenue. A huge thank you to Rabbi Zuckerman, Cantor Davis, Valerie Russo, and Debbie Cosgrove for leading us, and to all of the trip participants for being open and vulnerable, and for sharing laughter and tears with new friends and old. Maya Angelou famously said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." For me, I will never forget the stories that we heard about Israelis' experiences on October 7th and since. I will never forget what the IDF soldiers and volunteers in Israel have done and are doing, and for sure, I will never forget how I feel following my time in Israel. If you can't go to Israel, I would encourage you to find ways to help and support from here. But if you can go, go. Be part of the unity that we as the Jewish people all need at this time. It won't only be impactful for the people in Israel, it will impact you in ways you can't even imagine. And how you feel, you will never forget. And if you're concerned about what you will say once you go, don't worry. Follow the advice of someone we met on our trip who said, sometimes you don't have to say anything, just be there. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm honored to be here today and really represent our group here. Alyssa and I did not compare notes, but you're going to hear some similarities, and I think that really reflects our trip here. So when Rabbi Zuckerman asked me to share a few thoughts about the PAS Solidarity trip to Israel this past week, one moment of the trip in particular stood out to me. A group of 45 members of the congregation, many of whom are here today, were led in prayer and song by Rabbi Zuckerman and Cantor Davis after seeing the most horrific terror in our lives and hearing nightmare stories caused by Hamas in Kibbutz Kfar Aza. We embraced as a group, sharing in pain so deep that we all couldn't speak. At that moment, Rabbi Zuckerman shared his dislike for the phrase, "There are no words." And after spending a week in Israel, I couldn't agree more. There are many words, and they need to be shared with this community and the world as hard as they may be. We as a congregation, as Jews, and as human beings have all spent countless hours reading articles, scrolling through social media, and watching the news in disbelief of what occurred on October 7th and what continues to transpire in Israel today. What our group experienced this past week was even more painful than what we thought before traveling to Israel. We heard detailed accounts of families' trauma on October 7th through intimate conversations with people who lost their loved ones, with families of the hostages in Hostage Square, and with many members of the kibbutz community who no longer have their homes to return to. Every person in Israel has their own horror story. While we will be forever changed by the people we met, including Chen, Ayelet, Yankele, and Victor from Kfar Aza, who each opened up on their suffering. 12-year-old Ziv, who broke our hearts as he spoke heroically about his 19-year-old brother Ram, who is still being held hostage. And Rachel Goldberg and Don Pollan, who passionately plead for their son Hirsch's and all the other hostages' return home. These people represent all the hostages and lives lost in Israel. We had the opportunity to support organizations such as Brothers for Life, who provide a sanctuary and new life for wounded soldiers, to donate tactical clothing to the Golani unit, actually my friend's unit, who is in need of better equipment as they return to the north, and to bake babka for the soldiers for Shabbat with the wonderful Nassimi. Through the resources at Park Avenue Synagogue, we were educated by talented leaders, colonels, politicians, and journalists on the failures that occurred on October 7th, the broken state of Israel, and the treacherous road ahead as Israel continues to fight Hamas and the even bigger looming battle with Hezbollah. So yes, the amount of darkness in Israel is immense and may take many years to fade. However, there is hope. The common thread throughout every conversation and interaction with the Israeli people is a sense of unity. The Israeli people came together as a nation in time of need, despite their political and religious differences. It is a nation of heroes with undeniable and unwavering strength. Israel feels the unity with Jews across the world as well. Each and every person we met showed tremendous gratitude to Park Avenue Synagogue for traveling to Israel to provide support, compassion, and love. Just being there provided them with hope and strength. So during the trip, a few Israelis asked me why I decided to come to Israel. Like many of you, I personally felt a strong pull to be in Israel upon first hearing of the terror attacks on October 7th, to provide support. Yet I couldn't precisely define what support meant or how we were going to let Israel know that we stood with them, even as I stepped on the plane for Israel last Saturday night. Having landed back home today, this morning, I have a clear vision of the purpose of the trip and how we can support Israel and Jews globally after bearing witness to the catastrophe. It goes back to the words. We were there to hear all of the words from the personal stories, as horrible as they are. To experience pain felt in Israel, and to then share everything with all of you and the world broadly. We must continue to share the words to fight the battle Israel and Jews globally are facing today. I know I speak on behalf of everyone from the Solidarity trip in thanking this community to allowing us to represent Park Avenue Synagogue in supporting Israel now and always, and for providing the unity that makes us strong. Am Yisrael Chai. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you both for representing the collective, as I said, many of whom are here this evening. I'll also tell you that one of the highlights of the trip, which you both left out, was hearing from Sergeant Major Jacob Zuckerman out of reserves. And Rabbi, you'll like this one. He actually stood up and answered questions from the group for about 10 minutes at dinner, which I've never seen happen in my life. Questions ranging from, what do you do all day in your tank, to what do you guys talk about? How do you cook? What do you eat? How do you go to the bathroom? Like real important stuff, right? But it was great for me to spend some time with my son. So thank you both once again for representing our group so beautifully with your words. Some of you have sent me things you've sent to your family. Please continue to share what you experienced. If you know people who were on the trip, please ask them about their experiences. There's much to say and much to process.